You have to partner with the public sector. You have to bring utility companies in as an authentic, valuable partner. You have to listen to communities, and it's really hard to do that. But it's worth it when it works.
I'm Carolyn Parrs, communicator, coach, and host of Just Power, a podcast about creating a clean energy future without leaving anyone behind. Join me as we explore the technologies, policies, and human stories that can make clean energy not just sustainable for our planet, but accessible for everyone. Welcome to Just Power Podcast. Never before have the words go local, be local, do it local carried so much relevance, especially in the times we're in right now. And that's why I invited on Jennifer Gremmert. She is the CEO of Energy Outreach at Colorado, a local statewide nonprofit that helps limited income folks with their energy needs, from furnace repairs to energy efficiency upgrades to help with a past due bill. Jennifer has extensive expertise in regulatory and programmatic solutions to ensure that vulnerable families have access to affordable, reliable home energy. Welcome, welcome.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Yes, thank you for taking time today. And thank you for the work you do, Jennifer, right? That you've been doing for so long. You're such an expert on this, and I'm so happy you took a moment with us today. I know it's not easy right now, so I'm just going to dive in and ask you, tell us first a little bit about Energy Outreach Colorado and your approach to helping families and communities with their energy needs.
Sure. So Energy Outreach Colorado is celebrating its 35th anniversary this year. And so we were really created to fill in the gaps for the public energy assistance programs, the LIHEAP program or the low income home energy assistance program, as well as the weatherization assistance program. And so when we started, we were really working to connect all the utility companies across the state, of which we have 65 electric utilities, to really work together about how do we embrace, Coloradans being able to afford their home energy. So we have partnered extensively with both the Department of Human Services, who manages the LIHEAP program here, as well as the Colorado Energy Office that manages weatherization. And so we're sort of that nonprofit partner in the middle that are, we're able to be a little nimble in how we deliver programs.
Got it. So it's just in case someone doesn't know what LIHEAP is, can you just explain what that stands for and what it is?
Sure. It's the Low Income Home Energy Assistance Program that is a block grant that comes from the federal government into every state. And each state manages that program a little bit differently. So in Colorado, that program operates for heating assistance from November to April. So when we started, really working to think about how do we broaden this, our program helps families year round. We can help with heating and cooling. We can serve those households that aren't eligible for LIHEAP for whatever reason. And we're able to just be a little bit more nimble because we have less restrictions on our funding.
Okay. So I was going to save LIHEAP for the end, but you jumped right into that. So I'm going to ask that question that probably everyone is asking you right now, is that, it's a beloved federal program. It's been around forever, and now it's very volatile, right, in what's happening. So my question is about that. Where are you with LIHEAP, right? And how would you have to pivot, perhaps, if it is eliminated or cut from our federal budget?
Right. Well, we have a contract with the state of Colorado through their LIHEAP block grant to deliver what we call the Crisis Intervention Program, which is a furnace repair and replacement program. And so right now, LIHEAP, so we're taping this April 30th. This is the last day of Colorado's LIHEAP program.
Wow, how auspicious is that?
Yes, that program is closed in Colorado, but families can access energy assistance through our program at energyoutreach.org. What we know is that the state staff or the federal staff at the Department of Human Services, those positions have been eliminated as of, a month ago or so. The block grant is going to be part of the continuing resolution conversation. And so, like all block grants, these are critical dollars to help the safety net in our country. And so for us, while we don't rely heavily on federal dollars, it's certainly a key part of our program. And I think the important thing to remember is for the last several years, we've been really braiding these programs together to provide a better kind of experience for participants or customers of utilities to access these programs. So if you remove one, it has a really destabilizing effect on
the domino effect.
the other important piece is that LIHEAP, a pretty large percentage, between 10 and in some states 25% of that block grant actually goes to the weatherization assistance program.
Okay.
And so that's a much smaller block grant that's coming out of the Department of Energy. And so eliminating LIHEAP will also have a real chilling effect on energy efficiency weatherization programs across the country. We're really fortunate that Energy Outreach was kind of created in this, filling this gap. So we'll be able to deliver programs across Colorado if LIHEAP doesn't exist, but it's $65 million in our state that would be eliminated.
Wow,
so it's
that's a lot of money. Yeah. So just so I get this, is that okay? So that doesn't happen, and then how is that being bridged? Right? Is it private funds? Is it local, statewide funds? What happens?
For energy assistance primarily comes from utility customers, either through, we have a system benefit.
So you're working with your utility.
Correct.
Yes.
So it's ratepayer funds, as well as we do private philanthropy. So just like many large nonprofits, we have an extensive development department where we have corporations that support our work, foundations, individual owners. So we're able to bring a lot of different funding sources together. Our program is delivering about $20 million in assistance a year. Some of it's very restricted based on the utility service territory, but at least we would have some energy assistance in the state of Colorado. We're working really hard with our national partners at the National Energy and Utility Affordability Coalition, the National Consumer Law Center. This is work that these organizations have been doing for over 40 years to, really ensure people understand the value that these block grants bring to.
We're going to know that even more now, right?
Right.
We're going to see what happens. How is this, or is this affecting the people you serve, right?
Exactly. I mean, eliminating all of the block grants. Like if you don't have Head Start, then you have families that can't afford childcare, that can't afford to work, that then have a harder time.
Right.
There's just a real ripple effect. And again, it's really important to remember these aren't covering 100% of people's utility bills. This is a small percentage that just helps them to make sure that they don't get disconnected, essentially, that they have access to this critical basic need that all of us need in our homes. And we've been working closely with utility companies, state departments of human services, and again, have really created some amazing partnerships in that. And so when you remove the largest piece of that pie, it dramatically devastates households. And I mean,
it's the whole ecosystem, right? When you change one thing, it has an effect, and it's not like a little tiny thing. It's substantial, right?
Well, it's a key bill that people have to pay.
Yeah.
And so when you're, unable to pay your utility bill, there's so many other consequences that. And so we really, feel good about what Colorado's done over the years in this like public-private partnership. And so, it is absolutely devastating. And I think the utility companies have been great advocates for this work. They're often going to the Capitol Hill to talk to legislators about what this means in their districts. And we absolutely know this is a really key program, that really helps bridge that gap with it.
Okay. So the utilities are at bat too, right? They're going, and because it affects them too, because it ultimately is going to affect ratepayers, right? Yeah. And that's not a good thing either, because energy costs are going up anyway, with our grid changing, with decarbonization happening, and all the other things, AI consumption, all of those things are mounting, it's like, to me, really bad timing that this is happening right now.
I think one of the things our core program started with energy assistance and that bill payment program and working to make sure people's arrears are caught up. But over the years, we've dramatically expanded our energy efficiency programs to provide that holistic approach. So someone coming in for energy assistance can then be referred to the, family home if they're in a multifamily apartment building, that we have programs that are able to improve the energy efficiency, reduce those bills, start to help manage the increasing utility costs. We also have a really great program in Colorado that we've developed over the years, which is a solar garden subscription. So we have utility companies that own community solar gardens that we do that subscription work to help, again, reduce that electric bill, in some
Okay.
cases up to 50%. So we've been thinking about in this transition how we always have to keep, the pivot is such a overused word, but it's so true. Every change that comes from new policies around renewable energy development, electrification of the transportation system, we have to make sure that all households that participate in those programs as ratepayers have access to the programs that allow them to participate in this energy future and to really start to manage that energy affordability piece, which I know this podcast is about. You talk about energy burden and you talk about, percent of people's income that's used for energy. And it's not, unfortunately going to go down. I know there's a future of more affordable energy down the path, but we're in this really tricky time
Yes.
of having to invest in infrastructure, invest in new technology, think about how we use energy in different ways. That's really impacting, the most vulnerable customers that just take a lot more time than the average consumer to be able to participate in that energy future.
Totally. It feels like everything is on the block, right? Everything needs to change because even how we look at energy. We had a show a couple shows ago. We had a censure on. They were talking about a
Oh,
study that they did on going net zero and helping energy providers with that. And they started off with a study that they did about and said nearly 1 in 2 people in the United States struggled in the last 12 months to pay their energy bill. I mean, that's a lot. That's oh, and then they had charts and all of that. What are we seeing in Colorado? Are we seeing those kind of numbers, or are we better off here?
well, we're a little better off because our energy prices are a little lower than in some parts of the state. We have oil and gas production in our state,
That's
and
right.
50% of our state still uses natural gas to heat their homes. And, a very stable natural gas market benefits those households dramatically. Where we're seeing some increases on the electric side as we're, again, changing the generation mix. When we started this work, really measuring it, we would say about 1 in 4 households are eligible, but that keeps creeping up. And so I would say confidently 1 in 3 households in Colorado
Yeah.
still eligible.
Yeah. 1 in 3 is the global average. The United States, unfortunately, is not doing so well there, but 1 in 3 is what we see globally. Uh,
When you think about it, just when we look at the participants that we serve, it may just be someone lost a job and they just need help paying their bill once or twice, right?
yeah.
Or they had a health crisis or a divorce or something that affected their financial situation. Then we have folks that are older adults or disabled that, are on a fixed income. And as you see other prices rise, the pressure on the available dollars in someone's pocket to be able to pay all these rising bills just keeps exacerbating. And so this is where, we need to have, be thinking broadly on how we work across all of these poverty reduction issues and affordability issues. But I will say, in the 25 years I've been doing this work, energy as a percent of income has just dramatically increased.
Okay. Yeah, some people don't when I talk about this, just, when I'm at a party or a networking event, they don't understand it. A lot of people don't. Like, what do you mean it's inequitable? What do you mean energy burden, right? Really? Up to 30%, 50%? We've heard even crazy numbers like that. I know that 6% is kind of where it right, 6% or higher is where it becomes an energy burden. Um, and that's a very real thing, and it affects all of us. And
It
what
does.
also affects, as you know, is that as these prices go higher and higher, we're seeing moderate income folks that may not be eligible for the low income things that they're struggling too. You know,
And I think we also think about the geography aspect of this. Colorado has sort of a central urban corridor. If you think going from Fort Collins down through Pueblo into Trinidad, you have the Eastern Plains, that's very agricultural with smaller communities with a lot of rural electric cooperative, utility companies or municipal utilities. And then you have resort communities, Aspen, Vail, where you have high income, but you have folks that are traveling multiple counties to work in those communities. And so the needs across each of those different areas are very different in terms of how we strategize to, work on bill payment assistance with different partner agencies, as well as develop this extensive network of contractors that can go in and do some of the energy efficiency work and
mm,
even some of the electrification work that we're doing now as that technology is advancing, and really can benefit households, especially in the urban corridor that don't have access to cooling. If we can install a heat pump, that can have huge health impacts in someone's lives.
yeah. So I started this show talking about local, right? Statewide,
Right.
local. That's where we're at. Everyone's really huddling into their own locales. So why is the local approach so essential now, especially with the some of the cuts and potential cuts? We don't even know what's coming down the pike. It could get better, right? It might change, but we don't know, right? And that's probably, kind of a vulnerable position to be in.
Well, when we started this work, utility companies had their own customer assistance programs. And part of the vision of Energy Outreach Colorado that really came out of some legislation was to bring all of those disparate utility programs together to leverage, to do fundraising, to improve outreach and education. Then, we've seen dramatic population growth in this state. And we've,
Yes.
election state, we are really innovative when it comes to energy. We adopted a renewable energy standard, you know, in before a lot of communities. And so what we have are really diverse perspectives, like municipal utilities. I think of Colorado Springs utilities, Fort Collins utilities. They know those customers really well. Those
Right.
are large municipal utilities. They have programs that directly serve. Colorado Springs manages its own programs and does an amazing job. And we connect with them when necessary. Like if we receive large, like during COVID, we got CARES Act funding, which was federal dollars that came in to support these programs. Then we're able to distribute those programs across the entire state. But Colorado Springs Utilities really runs their own program. Fort Collins, we partner with them just because we've had that relationship. And so we have to be nimble about what utility companies need and
Yeah.
want within our own community. And then how do we leverage sort of the expertise as we have as a statewide organization that also is able to bring in other private resources and bring all these different funding sources together. And so that's what's been really interesting in the transition. Xcel Energy is our largest investor-owned utility
Yeah.
that serves 70% of the customers, but it's really about 30% of the land mass of the state. So if you know Colorado, you have the Denver metro area that Xcel serves, but their electric service territory can go up to Greeley, Colorado, in Wells County, into Grand Junction on the western slope, Alamosa, and the San Luis Valley. So when I think about, energy assistance, I really do think statewide, and how do you think about not only the gas provider, but the electric provider. And then just to, add some, interesting nuance, we have customers in Southern Colorado, 30% of whom use wood as their primary heating source. There are over 350 propane vendors that we've partnered with, so in certain mountain communities where there isn't access to electricity in the same way, propane is the key, energy source. So we have to think about all of this together when we think of policies, when we think of delivering programs. And, from what we find in the policy side is people think of the largest and the one that they're living in, right?
Yes.
Or that they experience. And so that's what we're, always having to remind that this is a really broad group of organizations that all have really different nuanced needs. Even the size differentiation between, the city of Oak Creek up in northwestern Colorado compared to city of Colorado Springs, that population is hugely different. They serve a, very different number of lines, but they still have to provide reliable, affordable energy. And so, having a one size fits all doesn't
Wow,
really
that's
work.
very diverse. I have lived on mountaintops where the propane truck comes up and I would be saying my prayers right about then because it was always a huge bill. And I'm like, oh my God, here we go. And then, and then lived, in metropolitan areas. So, and Colorado is so diverse. And you're working with all those utilities. That's
Correct.
tremendous when you think about that, and all of them have different issues or different problems, different kind of customers that have different needs. Um, can you talk maybe, I read on your website that you have from the beginning, which was in 1989 or I think
Yeah.
89, that you've invested $410 million in your programs, right? And can you share an example of where you've had like a key impact in a community?
Yeah, one of my favorite examples, it was called the Adelante Project, and it was in the Elyria Swansea Globeville neighborhood, which if anyone's gone to Denver International Airport and then gone to the mountains, it's right along that I-70 corridor. And so there was a big Department of Transportation project, and 500 homes within that construction zone have about 200,000 cars pass over them every day. So it's a huge concentration of pollution. There's a refinery that's close by. There's a lot of industrial. And so those homes were going to be impacted by this construction. And so we were brought in because there was, a pot of money Department of Transportation had set aside. We partnered really closely with the city and county of Denver and Xcel Energy because we manage both, organizations' rebate programs. So we were able to go in, I think it was actually 300 homes now that I say that. And we did full energy assessments of those homes. There were about 70 that had you would have had to red tag the furnace because it was spewing so much carbon monoxide.
Wow.
It was 50% renters, 50% owners, highly Hispanic, low income community. So you really had to build trust within that community because, they had been approached other times for other solutions. And it's a very, challenging situation. And when we knew we were going into those homes, we had to insulate them, air seal, replace windows, add air conditioning. If we were doing all of that work, we were going to be increasing their utility load. So in partnership with all these organizations, we were able to provide energy assistance for all those households for 5 years, monthly for 5 years to support that, and then do a lot of education around, energy usage. And it was just a really great
Right.
operation of a neighborhood targeted approach that was coming at it from a noise and dust remediation perspective. And what we really did was made it a healthy homes program, because we know from all the anecdotal work that we did with interviewing folks to not have all that noise and dust in your home every day because you had equipment that was working, that was highly efficient. People's utility bills were more affordable. Their homes had higher values. They really understood what that meant in terms of that was going to bring up the, values of those homes. There were just so many really positive things about that project. And we were so uniquely able to step into that space because we had all the relationships, again, with the city and county of Denver, who made a lot of accommodations for that work, with Xcel Energy, the key utility partner, with community organizations that did a lot of our education and outreach in the language that people spoke. We had an on-site staff person through that entire year that could, handle situations. And yeah, we're really proud of the work that we did
Yeah.
there.
And so the result of that program, and how is it doing today?
It's good. I mean, I think we're monitoring those homes to some extent. We're seeing some of them were sold. We're seeing like transition in that neighborhood because of that big project being
Okay.
completed. But there was also a lot of organizing within that community, and they really have an amazing advocacy voice to help them, bring in new affordable housing, new businesses, keep thinking about that this community is incredibly important. They've been disproportionately impacted by, lots of different things over the years. And so we really, need to always be thinking about them, and that they need that's more attention because they've had to struggle through some of this, that's supposed to be, for the betterment of the whole metro area, right?
Yeah.
Hear about this in community after community. And it really is that neighborhood approach, because most of our funding is more of a popcorn approach. People apply no matter where they live. And I think what we're really seeing is neighborhood approaches,
Mm.
really building out what those neighbors want and what they need. And then how do we bring those resources together to deliver them in the most, efficient way, but also that gives them a lot of grace in the space.
Yes.
This is someone's home, and we have to, go in multiple times. When you're adding insulation in your home, it's a mess. You're sometimes putting holes in walls and drywalling. And I always joke that we're in such an HGTV world of people see these magic transformations so quickly, but they're never, if anyone's done anything in your home, it's never easy. It's
And
never
it's
quick.
always longer than they said it was going to
Right.
be. So,
It's hard, but
right.
it's the right
It,
thing to do.
yeah, it interrupts your life for sure. But
Yeah.
the promise of something better is there, and which you've delivered. That's fantastic. Um, So, um, you mentioned working with utilities, right? That you're a nonprofit that works closely and collaborates with utilities. And you mentioned that going neighborhood to neighborhood, which is about meaningful engagement. And I just harp on that all the time, how important that is. I wonder if this is going to be like all that's going down, that this is going to be a positive um, transition, perhaps. Maybe you've been doing it all along, but other utilities out there and other communities, nonprofits maybe have not worked as closely with their utilities. So any best practices on that? Uh,
It's important for people to remember, like, when utilities, before all the automatic metering and things, like, there were meter readers going into people's backyards reading meters. And those utility staff were like ombudsmen in the community, saying if someone needed something, or, and then as our technology changed and we had efficiency of like drive-by metering, and now the new smart meters where you have this two-way communication. So for sometimes you had utility companies that had all these local offices all over the state or their jurisdiction. Then they closed for efficiency. And there was like, no, we can take care of it through automation. Now we require that two-way communication. So things are having to change. They need us as customers to help them monitor their load growth because of just, all of the demand changes. And so as we electrify vehicles, as we electrify homes, as we think about new technology, we have to have that interaction. And certainly for us, the same customers that our utility partners have, they're our participants. They're folks that need help. And a utility company doesn't want to be in a situation of doing income qualification, of asking someone, how much is your household income? Or what are the ages of the people in your household? They rely on partners like us to do that work and then connect those programs together. And we just keep getting better and better at it. And we're in a unique situation in that we intervene on an advocacy in an advocacy role, like in rate cases or rulemakings at our Public Utility Commission. And so sometimes we don't have the same position as our utility partners may have, but we typically have a very good communication around that and work toward a collaborative solution. And yet, their funding flowing through us, requires, really deliberate, intentional, work. to be able to say, we understand your business model. We understand the challenges of it. When natural gas prices go up, that is a cost you have to push, or flow through back to customers. How can we help communicate that and, let customers know that there are programs that those utility companies are partnering with? Or if someone's trying to do something, how can we help them on an advocacy front? We just did that with Platte River Power Authority, which is a transmission and generation company. So these are, and again, we talk to our community members a lot, which are their customers. And so we can share stories and vice versa. If there's something that's broken in our distribution system, they can let us know as well.
That's a great relationship. I'd love to see more of that happen. I've worked in other states where I haven't seen really that kind of interaction. You see with municipalities because that's their business model, right? So I love that a nonprofit is really working that closely, helping the utility do a better job, and vice versa, right? They'll helping you do the best you can with all of that, what they know, their data, their resources. So,
It's really relationship building. I mean, it's easy to demonize a large company like a
we
utility.
love doing that in America, don't we?
Yeah. They call it the Disney approach, that we have to have an enemy, and in order to feel like we can change things. And our experience has been, the more collaboratively we work with our utility partners, the better. Again, it's not always smooth and we don't always agree, but we can agree to disagree, and we can learn from one another. And again, it's a really complicated, nuanced space. It's changing so much. And so I think we have to keep recognizing that this is going to keep evolving. And again, there's so many layers of customers that need things differently. And so I think that's what we're learning with the more segmentation we can do, the more understanding. Utilities are trying to understand their customers because of all the programs and products they have to offer. And then how does that play into the work we're doing with some of those more vulnerable customers that they struggle to pay the utility bill? And how can we bring these resources to better serve them?
Yeah. Well, it's very refreshing in the age of polarization, when it's so cool. I don't even know if that's the right word, just so prevalent to stand in your stance and not move, that you're doing that kind of work, right? And that's what we need to be doing more of here, right? Is that kind of openness to collaboration, knowing your customer, and then other nonprofits working with the utilities, because let's face it, I always say we're all in this together. We really are, right? So Jennifer, in closing, and talking about where we are right now, any best practices or perhaps words of wisdom that you would say to other organizations or groups that are feeling the heat of this moment on how to do it, right?
Well, I mean, again, it's we're in such a tension when we're trying to accommodate like greenhouse gas pollution reduction, which is critically important. And we understand resiliency, impacts of climate on vulnerable households, people that are experiencing point of, pollution in their own communities. We understand the sensitivities around that while we're trying to balance affordability. There's just a real natural tension here. And I think the more all of us learn about each other's positions in this space and not discounting them, and recognizing, we all have to change how we think about this in order to move forward in any kind of productive way. Again, one side demonizing the other, we're often put in the middle of that situation. We have a lot of environmental groups that we work with because of our nature of energy efficiency, renewable energy development, thinking about disproportionately impacted communities. But our funding is coming from utility companies, oil and gas producers, that they may not agree with. And so that automatically kind of puts us in a unique situation. And the more these conversations are happening around the complexity of adding, new transitional energy to a utility's load, if you used to be able to just turn on that coal plant and that was your base load and it was, always there. Now, when you have intermittent sources, things are, challenging in some cases. We have to keep an open mind on how this is going to flow out. because it is expensive in this transition. And we've done this before in our country where we haven't taken cost into account. And it's had really terrible consequences when we think of housing policies, when we think of healthcare policies, when we think of other things. And I think energy is one. Imagine your life without electricity. It's impossible anymore. And like you even pointed out with AI and data centers and the demands, and as we're electrifying, it's all moving in a direction that we can see the future. And it's amazing. It could be amazing, but we can't leave people behind.
Right. That's
And
exactly it.
this is this tension. And so I'm so glad there's so many more people talking about it. You've had Dr. Johnny Reeves on your podcast, Dr. Diana Hernandez, who's doing amazing work. I mean, they're
And more to
academics.
come. And we have had Jennifer Gremmert on our show too.
Well, and again, there's been advocates working hard on this for 40 years. I'll give John Howard at National Consumer Law Center, and just lots of people that have done, Roger Colton, who is my mentor and who has just took, all the data analysis around this. And it's been a really systematic, recognition that you have to partner with the public sector. You have to bring utility companies in as an authentic, valuable partner. You have to listen to communities. And it's really hard to do that. It's really hard.
Right.
But it's worth it when it works.
Yes. Well, you're helping so many people for so long. So yeah, bravo for you, Jennifer. Thank you. How can people learn more about what you do, and where can they find you?
Yeah, we have a tremendous website at energyoutreach.org that has links to all of our programs. We have all of our financial information on there, annual reports, case studies that we've done in some of our multifamily affordable housing energy efficiency work,
Nice.
work about our, renewable energy programs. And so we're always happy to talk about it. We're really, really proud. And then we're always open to learning what other states work and learn from one another.
Okay. Well, thank you so much. Thank you too for joining us here again today on Just Power podcast. Even though the chimes are a-changin', I want to just say, stay true to who you are, whether you're an individual, whether you're a group or a nonprofit. Stay true to your mission, to your values, right? At the end of the day, we are all in this together. Thank you for joining us. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure you subscribe to Just Power wherever you get your podcasts. And if you really loved it, leave us a review and tell everyone you know about our podcast. It's going to take all of us to create a clean energy future that leaves no one behind.